Today we're going to be getting into another exciting topic, topic of self-care, which may be one of the areas that we need the most help in a lot of cases. How do we create an environment where people are taking the responsibility to care for themselves? So yeah, we're going to look at that. I remember back in the 80s and 90s, I was in Taiwan, the GCTC New Staff Training Director. One of my favorite classes in the New Staff Training is a session called Dynamics of a Movement. I'm not sure if anybody, that was a long time ago, I'm not sure if anybody here has heard of it, but it talks about the difference between a movement and a non-movement. And one of the differences between a movement and a non-movement that really touched my heart was the idea that in a non-movement, members look to the movement, to the organization to meet their needs. Whereas in a movement, members are looking to God to meet their needs. And I was thinking about self-care. And one of the characteristics of good self-care is that it ties into the master care area, where people are looking to the Lord, taking responsibility to come before the Lord to get their needs met. But it's even more than that. It's a stewardship of all that God has given us. It's managing our time well. It's actively looking for ways to get our needs met. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm excited about that. Before we do, though, I think let's have some prayer for Gensi. His wife, Coldy, is, I believe, delivering even as we speak, or at least sometime today. And pray for Karen's migraines as well. Karen Zanda, would you please pray for them?
Be glad to.
Okay, thanks.
Father, thank you that you are not unaware of any detail of our lives. You know about birthing babies and you know about migraines. And so we pray that right now in those specific situations that we know about, that you would be very present in a real way, that your presence would be known and felt. You would bring healing to migraines, and Father, that this new baby, this new life entering the world would be born without incident and would be healthy and happy and just a true blessing. Father, we pray for today, even as we begin our conversation, that you would supersede, you give us wisdom, you give us insight, and that the things we talk about today would be things that we would apply to our own lives, as well as impart to others, that we would do a good job of caring for ourselves, even as we give care to others. Be with the technology, prevent any issues, and be with Dennis as he facilitates. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Karen. Well, we are about ready to break up into groups. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our assignments for this last week. I thank you for your faithfulness in working on those. We'll have about 20 minutes to share as a group. You can share about your spiritual pathway assessment results. You can share a little bit about your personal spiritual formation plans. Let me go ahead and post that in the chat. Looks like we're ready. Going to break up into groups now and have a good discussion, and we'll share it for about 20 minutes in the groups, come back and have about 10 minutes to share with the whole group together. Okay, have a good time.
Did that resonate for you?
Kind of, because there was 25 points. Then I have naturalist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's kind of, I would say that. I mean, I do enjoy going out by myself and having time with the Lord. I do enjoy those silence for 1 week,
Mm-hmm.
which I find that it was quite enjoyable. At the end of that day, I will meet with the spiritual director. Yeah, so I kind of agree with that pathway.
Mm-hmm.
Then one of the suggestions for helping me with my aesthetic nature is to suggestion of creating a prayer room
Mm.
in the home,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, or you know. So I find that
Hey,
I
Anna.
I live by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I live on my own, and in my living room there's actually a big window, and it overlooks the swimming pool and the sea in the distance. So I find that actually that is a good space. But right now, after years of living, I have kind of fill it up with other things that I'm not sitting down by the window anymore. So I feel that, oh yeah, I need to clear up that space and allow myself to spend time with God, even in the living room, because Singapore is very hot,
Mm-hmm.
and I must have aircon, the kind of problem. So I find that if I stay indoor, I can look outdoor and I can still turn on the aircon. So that's what I like about it. Then another idea that came to me was that, oh, I can choose a particular bus route that is passing through nature,
Mm.
and our buses here are air conditioned. So I thought,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe I'll try out that idea.
And this morning, I going through the spiritual pathway assessment, and my most high score was on creation. There says that I connect best to God in the nature. Yeah. Especially when I was living in the countryside. I was born in the countryside and also 5 years in 5 years serving in the western side of Mongolia. During those times, I'm really enjoy early in the morning walking and outside and have time with God. Now I live in the big city, in the capital city, so not mostly doing this. For me is knowing which way is I'm more connected with God.
But they like all those contemporary worship songs, and I prefer more like Don Juan style.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been discussing that, like playing worship music or learning worship songs.
Yeah.
Another one was relational, and then actually my LDH member, she also expressed that she needs to have a small sharing group. So probably after this summer training, we'll get together for inductive Bible study. So it was good to share and find out each other's needs and where we can do some matching and things like that. And then read books. And I'm always reading books, always reading something.
That's really great. Yeah.
I try to take advantage of that, especially on my once a month I have day with the Lord, so I try to go outside to spend some time on the nature. And then about contemplative, it's difficult to understand what do they mean by this. For me, it's similar to intellectual, but maybe something different. But I like to study, to read, to spend time alone, and to get new information, new knowledge, so that I could apply it to myself and to others, to share resources with others as well. So I'm pretty agree with these results. And someone from my previous group sent me a file with detailed explanation for every category with some Bible verses or passages and the specific questions for each category. Maybe they will post on a Facebook group, but for me it was interesting to see how different you could. I believe they suggest Psalm 84 for each category, but they give different questions and different approach.
Silent repeat sometimes.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
You interact with at least one person each day, so it's not like total silence, but you have your spiritual director that you talk to either in the morning or in the afternoon, at least once a day. So
Wow.
plus you have like your regular, you exercise as part of your day, you read books. It's like a regular day, just not a lot of people around.
Sure.
Mm.
I had a young lady on my team. She was 18. She was an intern, and we all as a team decided that we were going to go on separate silent retreats for 3 days at this monastery near where we live. She just phoned me up a day and a half in saying, I need to come home. I need to leave right now. I'm out in the field talking to cows because they're the only ones that I'm allowed to talk to. I keep on rushing into breakfast and saying, oh, I'm really sorry. And then remembering that she wasn't supposed to be speaking. But yeah, it was kind of disastrous, really. just scraped through, but no, Dawn, bless her.
I think that would be me.
Yeah, well, Dawn, go very much mind, I must admit.
I love the idea of it, but practically speaking, no. Chi, what about you?
Yeah, I have similar scores with Lee Boyd, opposite of you. If you look at my email that I sent to you, I have both the 3 top. Naturalist 20 is Asiatic 22, Contemplative 20. I didn't know that the score came out so high. I mean, I kind of know that I'm inclined in this direction. So it's a bit surprised that, whoa, okay. I just realized that my life, the last 1 year, I should really learn from Lee Boyd. I really have to go for more days of silent retreat. My silent is usually about half a day, but not like a whole day, you know.
Much looking forward to this session, in the sense that because it's going to talk about self-care, and I picked a little bit into the article we must read for the homework. And I'm going to facilitate our LDH's staff development time, and the topic is the heart.
Right? Yeah.
The heart, and we had a clinical psychologist from Singapore, Mr. Mark To, come and teach us at our staff conference on the shaping of the heart as we grow up, and the heart being the spring of everything, of how we act, why we do what things. And so I guess the Lord is really wanting me to look into my heart closer and do some changes there.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, but that's great to hear that you guys have that opportunity. Yeah, and the topics seem really like relevant for this time too.
Welcome back, everybody. I was listening to your discussions. It was very encouraging. I think a lot of people learned a lot about themselves through the assessment. Why don't we share with the larger group some of the things that you learned doing the spiritual assessment?
Well, I'll share. After the first session, we evaluated our LDH with our team, and then we started to come up with like what things we can do, steps we can do to help our staff with the spiritual formation and things like that. And then this assessment with spiritual pathways scoring actually helped us to see that, hey, there's not only one way for our staff to grow spiritually. Like there's not only like the Bible study or prayer, spiritual disciplines, but actually someone can draw and experience God much more intimately in the nature, or through the prayer time in the small group and things like that. So it did help us as a team to see that, hey, there's not only one single approach. And when we develop plans for our staff for the spiritual formation as part of our member care, we should be considering all these different aspects. Thank you.
Actually, what you just shared there reminded me of some of our leaders who teach on spiritual pathways, who keep on reminding us we draw closer to the Lord in a certain pathway and someone else does another way. Sometimes if we don't understand how, we're all created differently and how those various spiritual pathways are, God's provision for us, that we can sometimes become judgy in how someone may not be like, oh, maybe they don't really participate in a lot of like musical worship. And then, sometimes we judge them for that. So that was an important reminder for me from the ministry leaders who usually teach on spiritual pathways here in Canada, that it's just important to honor each other and our different pathways and learn from each other as well.
As I was listening, both Lee Boy and Chi shared some really good stuff. You guys want to share?
Dennis, what did we share? That is so good that you want us to share.
Well, I was listening to you, and you shared from what you learned, you realized that you need to adjust your daily schedule a little bit more.
So I was just sharing that my scores tend to be very high on contemplative and also to be having silent, so that I learned from Lee Boy that he do schedule time to be silent, so that I realized that I need to do that. My silent retreat has been always half a day, but Lee Boy has shared with us that he's doing 3 days, 8 days, and now he's aspiring to do 30 days of silence.
I haven't done the 30-day yet.
Yeah, it's an inspiration to me. Yeah, I think as what Mandy say that I should not think that it should be imposed for all my staff. I want to see that in my schedule that I do have time for that. Yeah, I give me some idea to plan for my sabbatical, that I can look at these 30 days of silent retreat. That's a pretty cool thing that I can think about. Lee Boy, anything to add?
We're saying that maybe it comes with age also, because we're both ascetic and contemplative. Sometimes age and season in life has something to do with the pathway, I think.
We got time for maybe 2 more.
Actually, when I do this, I realized I didn't know myself as well. I thought I'm very much relational, and the most highest point was the activist. I was very shocked, because usually I realized today, I'm very much activist. Also, so it makes me think more about myself as well, and also during the time. And then I read the spiritual formation, and then I have not enough faith about God as well, because I have to wait more, but I'm still hurry, and I'm very busy, and also even nowadays I'm waiting for my visa, and also waiting for my son's situation, my family visa as well. But I'm little worried, and I'm little frustrated sometimes. So I want to focus on that more.
Thanks, Walter. By the way, that spiritual formation article that Karen wrote, I think we're the first to see it. It's fresh off the press. Joyce, I think you sent your group an article that explains the spiritual pathway assessment.
Yeah, Sylvia found the explanation. So I'm not sure if you want to upload it.
Yeah, I'll post it on the Facebook group.
Yeah, because after doing, my question is, what's next? Then Sylvia went to do some research. And the article was very good, because behind they have reflection questions based on the different categories that helps, at least helps me to be doing more in terms of finding my own pathway.
Great.
Richard Foster wrote a book on celebration of discipline. I think it's in our text. Is it in our text? It talks about spiritual pathways.
Okay. Yeah, we are making a list of resources. So go ahead and put those in the chat or post them on the Facebook page.
There's also a list of resources at the end of the article that would fit in with this conversation.
Yeah. By the way, great article, Karen. Thanks.
Thank you.
She did that especially for the member care course. Well, we should probably move on to today's topic. As I mentioned last time, the action points and resources for master care actually are related also to self-care, because how can we connect better with the master to enjoy his presence, to focus on him and receive the care that he has for us. So I think our assignments for last time were also very much related to the self-care aspect. We're going to move on then and talk about self-care. And I believe you all have read the session notes for session 3. Once again, one of my favorite sessions, but maybe one of the most difficult to move forward in, to ensure that all of our members are taking responsibility for their own well-being, their own care and development. So we'll talk about this, and we'll also think about it from an LDHR perspective, and what can we do to help foster that kind of environment. I'm going to post a couple of questions on the chat, and if you have something else you got out of the article, out of the session, you can share that as well. But just to help get the chat focused, here are a couple questions. There we go. Everybody get that? Looks like I sent it to everyone. So let's talk about the article, talk about the session 3. We say that self-care is the backbone for member care. What do you think that means? And do you agree? Why or why not? So let's start with that one. What do we mean by self-care being the backbone of member care?
Well, I would say obviously that is the one component that everyone have control over. Other things, the organization, the team, they do not have control over. But if we can help people, really understand and take ownership of self-care, I feel like that's the thing that can, prevent the most problems, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
As I read this resource, I was maybe a little bit surprised because it's very much connected to master care or master, and I think that's why it's backbone, because it's about our relationship with the Lord, and it's and that's why maybe it's above in our diagram, where is master at the center and self-care above, and foundation for that is our master. And without our tight, close relationships with him, everything other is meaningless. So I liked this.
Thanks, Sasha.
I also think like backbone, when you see from the front, you don't see your backbone. So it's somehow hiding behind your whole body, but it's actually the most important part of your body that if you don't have that, you cannot function. But also, it also means that we can easily ignore that part because we don't have good self-care. So maybe other parts are trying to function well, but because the backbone is not strong enough, that means other things cannot function. So that's what I think the backbone is like means to me.
I think as well, self-care is maybe it's preventative. So prevention is better than damage control. If we do self-care well, we're not going to get to a place where our staff are burnt out and stressed out and have to take time off to recover. And, then it's not this massive operation to get things back to normal, but it's actually continually keeping yourself healthy.
I've heard before a really good talk about what was termed soul care, which many people use sort of as another way to say self-care. I think a lot of people, a lot of Christians especially, push back on the term self-care because we're also told to deny ourselves. And so it's like, how does all that work out? But I like the thought that soul care, and it relates to what someone else said just a few minutes ago, but I like the idea that soul care is really the care that we receive in connection to God. So it's like, it's self-care as it is connected to receiving from our master and following. And I really like that idea because there are, I guess I've heard, I have no problem with the term self-care, but I've heard pushback about that from people. But I think in terms of the stewardship, starting with ourselves and being connected closely to God and how Jesus modeled that for us, there's no denying that that is something that's, the backbone. So that's kind of how I think about it. But like someone said earlier, really intimately connected to the master care, because apart from that, we can really go sideways and off of mission and things like that. So I like, for that reason, I really appreciate the term soul care, although, you know, that can also mean a lot of different things. But I guess the concept being connected to having that strong connection to the Lord, allowing his care for us, being obedient in the stewardship of our own selves first, because as my other sister said, that's the only thing we can really primarily control, and everything else flows from that. Yeah, I like that word you use, Sandy, the word stewardship, because I think to me it goes back to the idea that I hope that we communicate with self-care, in that self-care is really an act of humility, that to say like I will recognize that I am human and that I need to take care of this body and this mind and this spirit that God has given me so that I will be effective in what I do. So I think using those words as we communicate about this is important.
I looked up the dictionary. The definition of backbone is the chief support of a system, other than our physical backbone. But the master care is the heart of member care. It's the foundation of member care. But the chief support for any member care system that we as an organization can provide is self-care. What do you think of that?
You know, I think it's good. I think in my experience in leadership and in coaching leaders that I encounter something I call staff privilege, where there's sort of this sense of people should take care of me. And like, I should always, like, I shouldn't have to take care of myself, that people should disciple me and mentor me. And I think it's there, you know, it's really a blessing and a privilege that we work for an organization that does care about us and our spiritual lives. But to me, it's just a good accountability to call us back to how are we taking responsibility for that which God has given to us and to steward it well. I think I agree with you, Dennis, although when you say the chief support is self-care, there's something, like I want to go with you on that because I know what you're saying. It's just hard for me to think, I guess I'm just struggling with that. And I'm thinking master care is the heart and the backbone is master care also, but yet I do think that apart from our response to that, which if that's what we're sort of calling self-care, you know, our response, we're in a relationship with God. So apart from us responding to that with stewardship of our lives, whether that means taking care of ourselves or just constant being in contact with what does it mean right now? What is he calling me to right now? What is the step of stewardship, of obedience? And a lot of times that does involve self-care. So I guess that's my answer. I guess I'm having trouble even separating self-care from master care. And maybe that's why I push back on, I'm not pushing back, I'm just kind of working it out in my mind that our main support system is master care connected intimately to self-care, which might equal soul care in my mind, but maybe I'm mincing words.
I had a very similar thought to Sandy and was processing the same thing, that I'm having a really hard time kind of separating them. But I really liked in Karen's article, The Spiritual Formation, on the second page, she says that spiritual practices or disciplines have long been seen as a way to make ourselves available to God's work of transformation. And then spiritual disciplines can do nothing. They can only get us to a place where something can be done. And so I just feel like that kind of plays into it of the self-care. I just feel like, I don't even know how to say it, but it ultimately all comes from the Lord, and like the self-care, we can do all these things, but it's caring for ourselves and making ourselves available for what God wants to do in us. And so I don't know, I'm not disagreeing, but I just, same as Sandy, just trying to work out in my mind of, are they really separate, or are they just very, very intimately together? And the self-care is making ourselves available for what God wants to do in us.
Well, I think maybe clarify as well, like when my understanding of self-care also, and here also, right, it's like it encompasses our minds and our bodies as well. And so just saying self-care equals soul care, I think is a part of it. But I think the emphasis on caring for our minds and our bodies is connected also to master care. Because I think, and this is my own learning in this past year as well, actually in the area of like nutrition and really thinking through like self-control. I mean, like thinking through self-control is a fruit of the spirit, but for me personally, it's never really been an emphasis. And I've always like kind of wondered about that self-control piece of the fruit of the spirit. Yeah, coming and facing towards like health and nutrition and actually what that means, how having an emphasis on nutrition has actually changed my mind as well, like changed how I mentally think. I feel like that is my stewardship of my body to be available to God, and what you were saying. I can actually attest to the fact that due to some nutritional changes in my life this year, like I'm actually operating at a mentally higher capacity. And so I actually think that aspect of self-care is so encompassing and holistic that in regards to, organizationally, I think the aspect of education and permission for our staff members to really focus on that, that they have that stewardship and their responsibility to care for themselves mentally and physically, and of course spiritually in terms of master care. That's how I'm able to kind of think of it slightly separately from master care, but all related together, because I think self-control is part of our relationship with the Lord, because we are laying ourselves down in terms of giving our cravings or giving our certain things that we derive like comfort from back to the Lord. And so anyways, I don't know if that was helpful.
In South Africa, we created a care questionnaire, basically test people's self-care and their awareness of what's happening in their lives. And we decided to put it into 3 categories and to say that you are body, soul, and spirit. And those 3 categories are all part of self-care and part of each other, and they influence each other. So if your self-care spiritually isn't doing well, it's going to have an influence on your physical being and on your soul. So we basically have this questionnaire, and we ask them a lot of questions on how you're doing physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and making sure that their self-care routine and working from there, and the plan forward includes all 3 of those categories. So we, in some way, you can't really separate them because they influence each other.
When we interview people for staff, our staff standards include the areas of maturity, physical, social, mental, emotional maturity. So those are things that are standards when we're looking to accept people on staff, but they're also things we need to continue to grow in, and that's part of the self-care. I guess the $10,000 question is, as LDHR, what is our role? What is our role in ensuring or promoting an environment where our staff are taking that responsibility to care for themselves, responsibility for their own well-being and care? So let's talk about that. It's not an easy balance.
I feel like it starts with us modeling it in our own lives. And then that encourages others to do the same, and also gives them permission to realize they can do what they need to do to take care of themselves.
I like some of the resources that Sunette, you guys are doing in South Africa with burnout and just informing people, taking surveys on self-care. That's a great exercise.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that our staff, they're not trained in things like, they don't understand what burnout is. They don't understand they don't know coping skills for stress. They don't know about healthy boundaries. There's all kinds of things. Some of them are going through compassion fatigue because they work with refugees or whatever, and they've never even heard about the concept of compassion fatigue. So I think for us, the main function for now for LDHR is to create awareness and just teach on tips about self-care and just what is burnout and what is it not, because people have interesting ideas of what they think it is, and different cultures have different ideas about what they think it is. In South Africa, we have a lot of white staff and we have a lot of black staff, the Black staff, their culture is very different. They don't believe in burnout. They believe it's something we white people made up because we're just not feeling like going to work, you know. And it's something that you need to figure out. But yeah, the cultures always have to be taken into consideration. But in general, our staff knows very little about these topics. So we send out regular messages to all our staff to just give one tip about one thing or explain one concept. What is burnout? What are the symptoms? That's all. Next week, you'll send out something about what is it not? The week after, maybe what are the protocols? You know, if someone is burnt out, what do we do? That kind of stuff. So it's very difficult because staff are really, you know, we assume they know, but they don't. They really don't know what it even is, let alone how to handle it.
I think one of the things that Sandy mentioned last week is something that we could do, which is to not always immediately rescue people in crisis, but rather to come alongside them and help them identify, you know, the ways in which God might be using their crisis to convict them or point them toward areas that they need to change in, but not to remove the consequences sometimes of their unhealth.
And something that's also very difficult for me in member care is that especially the team leaders don't know what to do and what these conditions are. If someone on their team has depression or burnout or stress or whatever, they don't know even how to identify it, let alone do something about it. So I think from LDHR side, our first priority may be to just train the team leaders and make them aware and teach them.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one of the first steps is to talk to our leaders, because if our leaders are just so busy modeling business as like a value or as something to be celebrated, then that will trickle down to the team members. So just having conversation with team leaders and area leaders, national leaders, talking about educating them on self-care.
One thing I like about our new member care diagram is that it's like an endless knot where all of the components seamlessly work together. So yeah, Liboy, the self-care and team care really flow together and have a strong impact on each other.
I'm thinking that that I think this practice, someone mentioned modeling it. I think it starts from very early, like from the time we have a disciple. The first thing, we want to teach them is to how to be fed from the word by yourself, how to study the Bible, how to relate to God, and to maintain a quiet time. So I remember from very early on when I got into the movement, that was so many times the emphasis. And if I'm with my disciple, it was expected that I would be asked how I was doing with the Lord, and still it is to this point. If I meet with anyone on the team or a team leader meets with someone, then I guess it shouldn't be left out to always ask, so how are you doing in your quiet times? So I guess it's from the very beginning just modeling that emphasis that your quiet time with the Lord is such a privilege, and it's really your main source of spiritual food. I'm not sure how to say.
Anybody else?
I think that as LDHR, we need to remind our people and staff that you can't give if you don't have it and if you're empty. So you need to fill yourself up spiritually, emotionally, physically, so that you would be able to give to others, to serve, to lead, and other things. Maybe it's very simple, but you can't give if you don't have that. That helps me in my life. And when I don't have enough strength, I'm reminded by the Lord that maybe it's time to do something with myself, to do some repair.
Great point. Yeah. Once again, just kind of flows together with the master care and the self-care and being responsible for our own care so that we can care for others. Now, I realize that self-care is such a broad topic, and I think our session just barely scratched the surface on the topic of self-care. I think this may be an area we need to develop more in. Did you have any questions as you read the session 3 notes? Any suggestions or anything that you feel is missing? Well, that must be our cue then to go on to the next section. We're going to be spending some time in group discussions again, and I'll try to make sure that Walter gets in the right group this time, and that Mike gets in a group. But yeah, we're going to be talking about the questions in the handbook and in the session. What are your greatest helps and hindrance to your own self-care? And what could you do to foster a better environment of self-care in your ministry? We've talked a little bit about that. But let's take some time in our small groups and discuss, and then we'll come back and share some of our findings with the larger group. Have a good discussion.
Yeah, somehow during my years as a student, I didn't get this idea to be responsible for myself in all spheres, not only in spiritual one. But because of I was moved to another city as a new staff when they accepted me, that helped me to step out of my comfort zone and to realize that I'm still weak in this area. And during those 2 years of training, I think God used that and prepared me so that I could be moved to one more city after the training, and in a year I became a team leader. So I'm very glad that God. I wasn't glad when they moved me to another city when I became a staff, and I was surprised. But now I see that God used that in my life because of new circumstances, new team, new people, totally different religious background and other things. Everything that God used, and even living out of dormitory, living in the apartment, and so that's what God used first years to build that foundation for my staff years in Campus Crusade.
Yeah, I agree that like planning is really important, and you were talking about like years ahead, but I'm even talking about like weeks ahead. Even actually like very simple things like meal prepping is very helpful. I know it's a little harder for entire family, and so sometimes the practicalities of that is hard. But the planning of like in your schedule of planning that alone time or that time of solitude or that time of worship, like you actually need to plan it and put in your schedule and have others know like how to respect and honor that time. Yeah, because Sabbath doesn't just happen. Like you really actually need to arrange your life in such a way that Sabbath can happen. And so I agree with you, like planning is really key.
For me, my greatest help has been somebody holds me accountable. There's that willingness to just ask hard questions. How is your walk with the Lord? What's happening? And I think hindrances at times is also discipline. The discipline of just being quiet down with the Lord and study His Word. So these are my having a buddy to hold me accountable has helped in this whole area of maintaining discipline in doing quiet time.
Improve this part, and then after time goes, after you get busier, after you have more things to do, you kind of forgot about it, and after a while you come back again, oh, I didn't really do that. And so I realized I have that kind of tendency, and then I realized, oh, I probably need someone to help me constantly check with me, like, okay, Lillian, are you doing your PDP? Are you doing are you doing this and doing that? So I think for me that just consistency is one thing. And also sometimes I feel like I want to improve A and B and C. There are too many things at a time. And when you want to improve too many things at a time, that means you're not improving anything at all. So also I was thinking, okay, I really need to really prioritize something first. What are the things that I wanted to improve or to change? And then list that out and then do that for a while and see results. And if things are improving or getting better, then I can think about like next step. So I think that's something, especially for me, that like self-care needs to be do this way so it will be more helpful for myself.
Calling me to for this season, and this is what care looks like for me right now. Yeah, I think, and what you said, Suna, about accountability, I was just thinking yesterday, like I feel like there are things that I feel like God's been kind of whispering, like, this would be healthier for you to do this, you know, like these patterns in my life. And I can sort of try to do them on my own. And then I'm like, that's no big deal if I don't, you know, do this. And I just was thinking yesterday, now I need to to let a couple friends know, like, this is, I feel God calling me to step back on these things and add these things in instead. And I need someone to ask me how I'm doing, because I think it's sort of prideful to think that I can just have enough determination and discipline that I'll do it on my own. And I just don't. So, and I'm somebody who, you know, I am an Enneagram 3. I'm very good at discipline and goals and things like that, and I still can't get it done. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The self-care actually requires other people.
Pursue things that run contrary to what we're doing and what we want to see in terms of self-care. Like, we celebrate people who are just busy, although very productive, but not taking care of their soul as leaders. So there are some things that we do as an organization that go against what we really want to see in our culture. So I don't know how to address that. But I think one of my greatest helps is that I'm realizing that I'm able to give more to others when I'm rested, when I have time with God, and when I'm in good condition physically, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, all those areas. I'm able to minister deeper and better. So I have to learn to take care and plan how to take care of myself.
Yeah, Chi, you said a good point too of, I don't know if it was just culturally or theology, but I feel like as an organization, we need to have a good holistic understanding or good theology of what self-care is too, because we're not going to be able to promote that within LDHR, within our ministry. We very much vary, and it could be, you know, depending on culture, it could maybe look a little bit different, but I feel like it would be really good to just really have a good, clear understanding of what does self-care look like from a biblical perspective, or what is, you know, good theology on that, and then making sure that we as leaders or staff are doing that. And then if we're coaching or discipling or leading a team or a group, making sure that we're living it and showing it, and then also teaching and encouraging that too. But I know you got me thinking on, is it cultural, is it theological, and yeah, where do some of those differences come from? And obviously very much culturally too, but yeah, just what does our theology as a ministry look like in terms of self-care?
Inside of one of his leaders. And and I realized that we couldn't solve all those issues, questions, to find all the roots and causes. It's God's business, it's his role, but somehow he gave us part of his work, and we need to realize what is that part and to be faithful in that little thing.
Yeah, my husband likes to say that leaders have the privilege of solving problems, because we really only get to solve problems because the things that people can take care of, they do take care of at their local level, and only the problems find their way up. So, I mean, it's constantly, you feel like you are in a problem-solving mode many times, and it's just very hard on your soul. So I can see that.
Finances. And so even in those areas, like, we want to encourage our staff to take care of their finances, their retirement planning. And so we've done some sessions for more senior staff as well on how to retire well, things to be thinking about, and letting them know about some of like actual practical information from like retiring with power to change. Some of our long-term serving staff are qualified for continued benefits. And so benefits after retirement. And so, yeah, I think it's just that education, having that space for people to learn and feel like that they can think about those things.
I think educating our team leaders and even strategic leaders and national leadership about self-care, that we do need to encourage self-care in our staff, in our teams, is also important. Oftentimes what we see is the leaders are driving the people to more work, even on Saturdays working, and then expecting everyone to be up and running on the next week on Monday. So I think for Mongolia case, our leaders also need some education in this regard.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I really hated to bring you back. Your discussions were so robust and exciting. I do know the Asian people need to be pretty soon, so I did need to bring you back. Why don't we share a little bit about some of the things that we talked about, our own personal journeys in self-care. What are some of the barriers, some of the difficulties, as well as how can we do a better job of supporting and fostering an environment for self-care? Thoughts?
Okay, so when I got cut off, I was sharing what I thought was a bit of a crazy idea that I had as we were talking, but we tend to put the things that are important on our position focus, but we don't say anything about self-care. So I wonder if an item on our position focus related to self-care would be just as important as everything else we're asking our staff to do, so that they see that it's not just okay, it's actually good and it's expected that we care for ourselves in the midst of doing ministry.
In South Africa, we developed a care questionnaire testing their self-care on body, soul, and spirit, as I mentioned before. And we actually added that to our position-focused conversations. So 3 times a year, our staff have a position-focused conversation with their team leader, and that's part of it. So that it gets picked up and they want to see improvement. So they also have to make SMART goals for themselves to do self-care well, and the things that they're struggling with, they need to actually write it out and develop goals, and it gets followed up on, and they're kept accountable for it by their team leaders. So we're still testing it out. So it's new, and it's still something the team leaders need to get used to it as well. But we also developed interviewers guide for the team leaders. So when they have these conversations with their team about all these emotional issues and stuff, that they know what kind of questions to ask and know what to do, what the protocols are if something big happens and you suddenly realize this person is maybe addicted to something or whatever. Then what then? What should they do? But I'm hoping that will maybe answer your question and be helpful.
The resources that Sunette had were posted on the Facebook page, and we'll also make them available. And the last document of our course has other resources, additional resources. And so those will be available for you there to use and edit as you need. As I was listening to the groups, 2 main things came out. One was accountability, and the other was the culture of our organization. And Sunette, it seems like what you're doing is dealing with both.
I'd like to ask a question to Sunette. I've been listening for the last few weeks. I keep on hearing you sharing very good ideas. You have forms, you have resources. I'm just interested to know that, because as what Dennis you just mentioned, is not just helping the staff, but you're also bringing a culture to the organization. So I think that's the challenge that we LDHR faces. The things that we want to bring is not a culture. It's not a culture. We need to change the culture. And when we say change the culture, it means we have to deal with the leaders at the national level, at the team level, and along down the line. So I'm just interested to maybe hear from Sunette how do you bring that change, and what are some of the challenges that you face in bringing those changes? Because I hear so much good stuff. My question in my mind is that how do I bring this? I feel that my culture doesn't allow me welcome some of these changes. Or they like it, but it will not be sustained to become a habit. We will probably we like it, we do it for the first 10 days, we will fizzle off, sometime. You understand my question?
I think it's very complex because you have an organizational culture, and then you have different cultures, different people from different countries and backgrounds working together. And you have to kind of, when you develop resources, you have to keep all of that in mind. For us in the organizational culture, we decided to start with a national leadership team. So what I did is I made appointments with them, with their spouses, because normally the spouse isn't really considered, and they're actually very involved in this person's life. And how it's going with their family, that kind of stuff really influences them a lot as well in terms of their care and how they're doing. So I saw them with their spouses. I had them with their spouses each of them completing the care questionnaires. And then I see them, we talk about the stuff that they're struggling with and set some goals for them. And I just listen to them vent and create a safe space for them to be able to say what they want to say, which I think the leaders don't have a safe space where they can just say how they really feel about things. It's to say things like, I am angry at God or whatever. So we try to just chat with them, create that safe space, and build a relationship with them and their spouses. And then normally when I have a conversation with them while we're still there, before I leave, we already schedule a follow-up conversation. And sometimes, depending on how serious their problems are, sometimes that may be 3 or 4 months later, but we already make that date and we stick to it. The good thing about that is, I think organizational change happens from the top down. So we start with the national leadership team, and if they really buy into it and see the difference it makes for them. Our national leadership team, I think our national director was nearing burnout when I tested him, and we started working on burnout prevention stuff, and I gave him homework. And 2 other people on our leadership team is very close to, well, one has burnt out already, the other one is very close. So that because of these conversations, that was picked up, and some of it could have been, we were able to prevent some of it. And the other one who was already burnt out, we were able to immediately then react on that and get him the help that he needed. So that made the leadership team kind of really buy into member care, because they could really see the value of it for themselves and for their families, and they could see that we really do care about how they're doing, and we really do want to help them and give them a safe space. So that trust needs to be built as well first with the leaders. So now the leaders are promoting member care and kind of testifying about how it's been helpful for them. So the problem is not all the leaders are going to buy into it, because some of them are not maybe comfortable talking to you or whatever their situation may be. And then you have the issue of different cultures. So if I have a conversation with maybe a couple who are Black people, it's difficult for them because their culture is just very different, and the way that they think about self-care and about all these things is very different. And unfortunately in South Africa we have staff on very different levels of income. The Black staff struggle a lot more to do MPD because it's a culture thing. The Black people don't give. They give only to a church, not to organizations or individuals. So for them, saying something like, go for a spa day is not possible. So there's so many things to consider, and you need to really make whatever your resources are. You need to really have a table with people from all the cultures in your organization and ask their input, because you think you know, but you don't. You really don't know what the way you see it's so different. So in the end, you might have to create 2 resources or 3 resources based on the different cultures in your organization and handle member care differently with each of those cultures. I don't know if that answers your question.
Good. I want to have more, but I think for today is enough for me to digest. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other thoughts, ways that we can help promote an environment of self-care? Well, let's move on to the next section. If you could open up your document, the session three notes for the member care course. Let's open up that document. I'm going to share my screen with you. So far it's worked well, so let's give it a try. Share my screen. Let's walk through some of the resources that we have available. And once again, this is a growing list of resources I haven't shared yet. Okay, can you all see my screen? In our notes, we see several resources. One is an article, hot off the press, by Andrea Baczynski. She had a resource that we felt was good, and we asked her if we could use it for this course, even though it wasn't directly designed for member care. And she said, no, let me just write another article. So this is a great article. She talks about things that only we can do. And one of those things is to watch over our heart. Great article. I think you'll enjoy it. The next one is The Wheel of Life. Now, I apologize. I've gotten requests from a lot of people for access for the materials. We've set the settings to allow anybody with the link to have access, and both my wife and I have gone back several times and reset the settings. Somehow they keep getting shifted back. So if you can't access any of the materials, just click request for access and I'll get back to you on that as soon as possible. This next article, The Wheel of Life, many have probably used it and are familiar with it. It's a great coaching tool. Looks at several different areas of life, from career to finances, health, friends and family, spouse, significant other, personal growth, fun and leisure, home environment. You can add a spiritual column there. But as you rate the different areas of your life from 0 to 10, you can come up with some ideas of areas that will need to be developed even further. So this is a great coaching tool that you can use. It has the tool, then it also has some notes on how to use it in coaching. The next tool is, it's not really developed for self-care, it's more for ministry effectiveness, but this was developed by Dr. Steve Douglas. And I think we may have seen this, but there are some sections here that can relate to the self-care, walk with the Lord, love for others, prayer and faith. So this is another resource that we can use. A great resource that Terry Morgan has developed and has been widely received is the 31 Days of Unhurried Living. If you have not seen that, it walks you through a daily, it's not really a devotion, but a daily thought, a daily meditation on the area of unhurried living. This is an excellent resource. It's got, you can take this, you can scan the code and it will take you to the resource that it's talking about as well. Supplemental resources, we have our new staff training has many sections that are related to the self-care. One is the Being a Wise Steward section. And there are several courses, several sessions related to God's design, self-awareness, time management, stewardship of time, stewardship of finances, and other things like that you can use as resources. We also have from the team leaders training, some good resources on self-management. There's a PowerPoint as well as a facilitator's guide to use for that, to teach about self-management, as well as learning as a lifestyle. Part of self-care is continually learning and developing. So there's a PowerPoint along with facilitators' notes to help teach on that. So these are resources that we have. I'm going to stop sharing and let you share. Have you used any of these? What do you feel has been helpful? there's some good resources. And like I said, we are continuing to develop our list of resources so that we can help prepare and provide an environment for care for our people.
Dennis, I have a technical question. Just I don't see among the I mean, in my handbook, for some reason, it doesn't come through the 31-day. I don't know, I checked again, but it's not, it wasn't in it this past week, and I checked again, it still doesn't show up.
Yeah, I think I added it to the course notes. I'll add it to the handbook as well.
Okay, thank you.
But you know how to get to the course notes from the handbook? At the beginning of session 3, there's a link that takes you to the course notes.
Okay, I did not know that. Okay, I will check that.
Yeah. So the session notes, Walter. If you look at the handbook, there are links at the beginning of each session to the handbook. So I recommend when you're doing the looking at the resources to go to the handbook, because it includes some explanations, some descriptions for the different resources.
The 31-day is not listed as a supplement resource in the handbook.
Yeah, I'll add it to the handbook. It's in the course.
In the course, huh?
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Walter, you're muted.
I got it. I didn't know that how can I access the session note 2 or 3, but just now I understood and I could access.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, great. For our discussions, the questions in the handbook are probably more related to our summer school. The course is it kind of goes beyond just this summer school. So yeah, check out the resources in the course notes, and we'll also make sure that they're in the handbook as well. Well, once again, we have homework. Let's take a look back at the handbook now and take a look at some of the homework that we have for this time. Our assignments. One is to let me post these in the chat as well, make sure that we're all tracking. One of our assignments is to read Andrea's article. I think she did a great job related to the area of self-care. Watch over your heart. It's one of the things that only you can do. The second is to, we talked about modeling and the need for modeling. For us to go through the wheel of life, exercise, and then as we do that, it will help us to be able to use it with others. So your homework assignment is to work through the wheel of life exercise. You can discuss the results with somebody in your office, in your ministry, or with your group members. Discuss your results, and we'll talk about that next time when we come back together. We also have asked you to draft and begin to execute a personal self-care plan based on what you discovered through that assessment. You'll come up with areas that are weaker than others that will need to be developed to help you through that. Dong has added the Unhurried Living ebook in your handbook for you, even as we were speaking. Okay? Any questions about the assignment? This whole area of self-care and helping to promote an environment where self-care is honored, where our staff are proactively involved in their caring for their well-being and development. It's an area that we need as a movement to grow in culturally. It's also an area that LDHR can help champion and move our staff forward in that. If you have any other resources, please post them on the Facebook site or send them to me, and I'll make sure that they get in the additional resources folder. Any thoughts, any questions?
Dennis, I have a question. I mean, not related to what we have discussed, but maybe a larger question. I like the framework, and we have been discussing there's so much richness in this and the concept with this. I'm just thinking, my question is probably at our area level or at the global leadership level. this model has not been shared with the rest of the leaders. So I feel very heavy. The burden is very heavy on my shoulder. That seems to be my responsibility to share this model. So I'm just thinking at that. Maybe I'm not expecting you to answer, but maybe at the global level, the leadership level, do need to think how do we communicate this so that there is a understanding. You know, the more I listen, my reflection is that different one of us do have very different understanding of this whole concept of member care. You know? So I think we do need to think of a communication strategy and also a tactical implementation strategy. That how do we then bring some of these changes in the midst of also fulfilling the Vision 2020 goals. Because at this current point is that all the areas are being tasked to say that the 2020 goals are the 2020 is coming, you know, and we better get our act together to raise more multiplying disciples. So I feel that tension, you know, that. So I'm just thinking, you know, that it's good for us to table that, and then that our global LDHR leaders, that we do need to think of how do we platform this, you know, on that. So yeah, so that's my question and my comment. I think as I wear the global hat, I think we should begin to think and shape this, because I know I think this is the third session, and it just dawned on me that there's so much that we need to that has become an important piece, you know, in our movement. So yeah.
Well, actually, the weight of the whole world is on your shoulders, Chi. I'm just kidding. No, that's a great question, and it's a great statement. And as we mentioned in session 1, as an organization, we are very mission focused, mission minded, and sometimes we do not do a good job. It's not in our culture to care for our wounded, to care for our staff. And the fact is, and I like what Sunette has done with it, starting with the leadership team, to just communicate that staff who are fulfilled and engaged and cared for can do a lot more ministry-wise than a staff who isn't fulfilled and cared for. And I agree with you that globally, this is something that we need to keep to the forefront of our global leaders, regionally, area-wise, and nationally. That's where, you know, you and others who are here might need to take a champion role in that as well. Anybody else have thoughts on that? That's a great question.
What we did in the beginning when we started with research is I went to visit other missions organizations who have existing member care staff who have done it for a long time. And I asked a million questions and I learned so much from them, just how they started, what they learned through it, what changed, what they stopped doing, what they started doing, what they changed, you know, what. So there wasn't someone in our organization who could teach me those things, but there are well-established member care departments in other organizations that work on the same concept. So that was very helpful for me.
That's where networking comes in play. Any other thoughts on that?
And I think it will be good to look at what we have now in our processes, in our systems, that may not be labeled as member care, but can be considered as member care. I think one of the focus, like spiritual leadership, if we just look at that deeper, I think that will be part of the master care and member care. So I don't know, we just need to connect things or look at what we have and just maybe continue to promote those. And we don't have to use the label member care maybe or master care. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that answered your question, Chi.
As we were coming up with resources for these sessions, the first thing we try to do is what are things we already have that may not be labeled as member care, but actually apply to the different components of member care. So most of the resources that we have available here are things that we in our organization have used and are somewhat familiar with, but have not associated necessarily with the aspect of member care. That's a great idea, Lee Boy. Any other thoughts?
I thought that Karen gave a very good idea, very revolutionary idea that I think one of the things that we really relook at our current position focus conversations and the way we might need to add in that component about self-care. I think when it's intentional, when it is deliberate, I think it fosters accountability, it fosters discipline, fosters that the focus, I thought that was a good move, for us as an organization to ask that part. I like to think that I'm not too sure whether to self-evaluate or self-criticize us. Is that this is one of the most neglected part in our own life. I mean, I don't want to say our own an organization, but I think it's including in our own life too, that we don't tend to put this as a high priority, if I may say that. Maybe except Sunette that among us that put that, but yeah. So I thought that is one change.
I just an additional thought to that. I do think that the PFS is we just established it like a year ago, so we are kind of new in it. We are still learning to work with it, but already some ideas came up that what else should be included in the PFS, and I don't know. I just feel like I would be cautious of what else to put in it, because if it starts to grow into a very big tool, then it might be just too big of a burden, too long of a conversation. I don't know. At least right now, our leadership we are still learning to work with it. So that's just something that another issue came up that should be put into the PFS, and then I asked my HR leader, and she was very cautious about adding additional things to that. So I'm not saying it's not possible for countries to countries, but just I was cautioned.
Agreed.
But the last conversation in the position focused conversations, the review conversation also should include a zoom in and look at your position focus results and how you've done, but also a zoom out and look next year, 2 years, 5 years down the line, and where would you like to be? So the career path type conversation fits really well in there as well. Other thoughts, questions?
I would just add to that in response to that, we talked about the value of leaders asking about self-care. So even if it's not on the position focus, or if that's not something that feels doable to some countries now, but yet it's amazing what's communicated with what we ask about and what we track and what we, and so even just a question or two that says, how are you doing with self-care, and what are some of the things that you can celebrate in terms of what you're doing, or if you continued with your same self-care now, where would you be in 2 years? Would you be burnt out, or would you be thriving? It's amazing what is communicated with what we ask about. So just some simple questions could do the same thing, and really communicate value of that. So I think what leaders ask about really speaks loudly. And so if our leaders are asking just one question about self-care, it gives permission to people.
I think we put a lot of emphasis on self-care being the responsibility of self and a stewardship thing. So in the care questionnaire that I mentioned, we test them, and they put whatever they tested. If they have a score of very low, maybe they're in the green category and doing well, and if they're intermediate, they're in the orange category and need to start thinking of working on things. And if they're in the red category, scoring very high on something, then they need help immediately to work on those things. But then those questionnaires are sent out basically quarterly to all our staff. And then the instruction for them is to if they have a lot of things happening in the red category, then they need to initiate a conversation with their team leader and take responsibility for themselves and for stewardship of self and for self-care. So then the team leader will contact member care, and member care will assist with resources and whatever to help the team leader handle the situation and help that person. I think that team leaders are burdened with a lot of responsibilities. So if you add too much to their shoulders and make it their responsibility to make sure that the team does self-care well, it's just going to be another thing on top of a million things. So when we speak with staff about any member care stuff, we always kind of promote this idea of your responsibility is you, and you have to take care of yourself, and this is your responsibility to ask for help or to take care of yourself and initiate that conversation with your team leader to get the help that you need.
And that was actually a great transition for next week's session, as we talk about team care and what is the role, the realistic role that a team and a team leader can play in that. Be a good time to share. This is the first time we're running this course out, and we may need to tweak it a little bit, but to whom much has been given, much is expected. So those of us in this virtual room really need to take more of a champion role in the area of member care, helping promote the need for self-care among all of our members, staff, volunteers, disciples, etc. And ask God, trust God to change our culture. Our time is nearly up. Any final questions or thoughts? May I ask, Hamrizel, would you close our time in prayer, please?
Yeah, let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you very much that you have given us this privilege to feed your sheep. And you are good shepherd, our shepherd, who always watches over us, and even now are standing at the right hand of the Father God and interceding for us faithfully, and who knows our needs. And give us strength, give us wisdom, lead us and guide us as we shepherd your people. And give each and every one of us in this summer school what we need to serve you in our LDH capacity. Equip us, encourage us, and the acquaintances we make here, may they be used for your glory in the months and weeks and years to come. And bless those who desire training, give them wisdom, give them strength. And thank you very much. In Jesus' name we commit ourselves to you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Hey, thanks everybody. Great engagement today. I really enjoyed it. Have a good week, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same station.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.